Blockchain Meetup, May 10, 2016, at the beautiful Borders on Broadway, Tempe, Arizona. And we have Mahesh Balan, CEO of Pravici. And he has a master's degree in computer science from ASU and was formerly a technical director at Oracle Corporation. And he is here to tell us about building a cryptocurrency on Ethereum.
Yep.
Right? Okay, awesome. So, Mahesh.
Great. So I've been kind of coming for the last couple of months for some of these meetups, primarily motivated by these two guys to kind of get into this whole area of blockchain technology per se. I know a lot of Bitcoin enthusiasts also come for this. Morpheus, I think you are very big in that.
Hey, I'm agnostic. I'm actually concerned that Bitcoin is not scalable enough.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I don't know if I have the technical knowledge to know if it's scalable to handle 20 or 30,000 transactions a second like Visa MasterCard process.
Right. So I think that's one of the many concerns, and many, you obviously have newer groups trying to develop stuff, and Ethereum in particular is what we have been kind of studying more or less the last couple of months for one reason or the other.
Mostly because it's new. And
it's just new. It's just a new thing.
Well, how long has it been around?
I think around 2014, 2015 is when they really got started.
Yeah, they
about
started like
2 years.
Beta. So their blockchain started in like alpha mode back in like August or something like that, like late last summer, I think.
Yeah.
But it really, been more considered more mature this year, really.
And that guy Vitalik, I think, obviously spent a ton of time studying Bitcoin deeply, and you might have read, or you can Google that, the fact that I think in late 2013 is when he started to think about doing this, and since then we see that it has got a tremendous amount of, if nothing else, a lot of adoption with the big giants, right? Like Accentures of the world have adopted it and done a lot of experimentation to do fintech, basically a lot of application in the financial industry. Can we put the whole dang stock market on the blockchain? Things of that nature, right? And there's been quite a bit of investments. Obviously, just look at the price of the dang thing; it's just gone through the roof here. Even though the stated goal of Ether, that's one of the topics that we will talk about today. The stated goal of Ether, unlike Bitcoin, is supposed to just ease the transactions, right? It's supposed to grease the whole system so that you compensate people for a low transaction cost. And so that's an interesting side thing. But anyway, so in the last couple of months, I've been watching it, primarily motivated by Brian's talk in January, where he went through a fairly extensive setup of just how do I set up and become a miner. And I believe your mining stuff is still running, Brian, and your
sometimes,
on and off. So
it's become much less effective, and so I don't always have it on. So I have a computer that I do other stuff on as well with GPUs. So I don't know.
Mining Ether though, or mining Bitcoin?
Ether.
Mining Ether.
Yeah. So
and there's just a bunch of stuff around. It's various ways in which it's different from Bitcoin.
Is Ether still using a SHA-256 hash?
Yeah.
No.
No, it's not
so
a SHA.
It's really their own. It's like a hybrid of a couple other. It's not a Dagger and Hashimoto, but then they tweaked it. It's really their own. So it's not SHA-256.
So this means that all of the custom hardware that was developed.
Yes. It cannot be used. No. It is fundamentally. That's right. I think you brought that up last time, right? Yes.
They're pretty adamant about that. So I don't know if they would.
Designed to be ASIC resistant.
Designed to be ASIC resistant.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah, which is hard in the end to do. Okay.
Yeah. So they want to make it ASIC resistant. I think you brought that out in one of that it is some. It's a kind of a unique. And I read also yesterday. I remember now that it is. You can support 256 through some, some other scheme is what they are saying.
Yeah, they have some. The guys have some experience about maybe having a flexible, like having to be able to change it.
Yes.
Having the hashing algorithm be more dynamic so that it's even harder to plan an ASIC because by the time you take, shift it, they might give a change to something else. So I don't know if they'll do that or not, but
The winner chooses the algorithm.
something, yeah, who knows?
So
interesting ideas there.
And of course one of their so to me and to my partner, one of the things, so just a little bit of background about ourselves quickly and our motivations here is we both of us work for Oracle and Siebel CRM platforms, enterprise software for many years, and then a couple of years back we started our company to primarily focus on like a boutique consulting organization. And we have done work for many companies since then, Dell Software. We've done work for Zebra Technologies. And currently, we are doing some work for GM, and we are a tiny company. Our focus is primarily in CRM. And what really motivated us to kind of look into this technology is really an application of potentially blockchain for doing loyalty, So if you think about the loyalty space, right?
That's big.
It's a huge thing and it's well established, right? So if you think about loyalty today, the big ones you of course know, like the airlines and Starbucks and all these things where people do even unnatural things to earn loyalty points. It used to be until they all recently switched over, to just awarding you based on how much money you spend. People in December would fly to London 3 times, or get a $60 ticket just to get the miles for it. So the thing about loyalty, which is appealing for what I think would be a good application for a decentralized network, is really the fact that if you can make the earning and spending of loyalty points reasonably ubiquitous, then you can really untap a lot of potential. First of all, you can. So think about, you were just talking about some examples, right? Suppose you we used to travel a lot, 200 days in a year, but now we barely travel, which is good for us. But if you earn, let's say a few thousand points, you can barely do anything with that, you can buy a ticket and stuff like that. But wouldn't it be nice if I could just trade that in an open network for Starbucks points, maybe, or even use it somewhere, right? Come here and say, what, I have 5,000 points that I can just use to pay for these 3 things, and I'll be happy, right? So
Make them more worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely make them more worthwhile. And the ability to do this, if you think about it, right? If it was easily transactable, then it opens up a lot of possibilities. This company, this little restaurant might be interested in just buying a block of points and handing it out for spending money with them, Or it could just be that you could have Southwest, Starbucks, all these guys trading in here, and just like how you switch from Ether to Bitcoin to dollars, you could be switching between these various loyalty systems because there's a marketplace for it.
Yeah, like a barter system where you have a barter, only the barter is not controlled by the central authority.
That's right. It's a
and
token.
Then you can. It's very easy to transact them because otherwise you don't have these little slips of paper you got.
Or just random stuff, right? That you just throw away. And so there's lots of dollars. Yeah.
So I see how it benefits the consumer, but from a corporate standpoint, I'm issuing loyalty points.
Yeah.
The reason I'm issuing you loyalty points and not dollars is because I want you to spend them with me.
That's true. Or your partner ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
So if I have, for example, if an auto company is able to convince a series of gas companies or battery charging places or battery charging units where for the mere act of using their whatever ecosystem. So I'll give you a little background on what is bothering big auto companies and stuff now is the traditional model of popping 25, 30, 40, $50,000 and buying a vehicle they believe might not be in the kind of monotonic increasing function that has been so far, right? And this year is going to be like 15, 17 million cars, but that's not going to be the case. So all these companies are experimenting with various ideas, one of them being like, we'll have autonomous vehicles or semi-autonomous vehicles, or we'll compete with the zip cars of the world by deploying a huge fleet of vehicles. All these ideas means that what is going to bind me to come and use. So, and one use case, which is is what we like to quote to the auto companies is, hey, if I'm going to be using the Ubers and all these guys of the world, what is going to motivate me to do one of few things? Use your semi-autonomous or self-driven vehicle. If nothing else, even if you step into a Uber thing, maybe you prefer to choose a GM vehicle, for example, and the very act of you traveling there will earn you a few points, right? In other words, how do you get the share of wallet in a market where you could be spending across, right? So the monolithic model of especially autos, that hey, you are going to buy a car, I can be rest assured every one of you guys, the cheapskates like me, once in 15 years, so other people might be once in 5 years, I've got this check coming through, right? That's kind of, they are starting to see that go away. So at least that's what I want them to believe, so that we can do cool things like this, So
And to sort of hijack the question, but because we had talked about this before, Mahesh, and
Yes.
when you mentioned, we talked about this point too, and what I thought was like, there's some things that I only go like once a month or something. They have a loyalty program, and I don't even bother like joining because I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. But and I know I've never really maybe earned enough points to be useful, but if I could get some points there and then use them somewhere else, I'd be happy. So maybe I'd be more likely to go there and buy more stuff because I don't get any points and I don't get to use them somewhere. Then someone else that buys the points from me will be happy because they love that place so much that they're trying to gain more points to maybe save 10%, 20%. And it makes their like really loyal customers happy because they give them more.
Yeah.
It's almost like a reverse income tax system. It's like when a lot of people who pay taxes, they do something, they're always like, okay, what's the tax implications of doing whatever it is? And the tax system is designed to get people to do certain behaviors. Well, it's using force and punishment to monetize this behavior.
Right.
Well, this is a system, sounds like, a reverse income tax where you're monetizing people through pleasure instead of pain.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole thing, right? And loyalty systems for the longest time. I mean, look at our behaviors, right? I mean, we do kind of tend to go with the airlines, even though we hate all these airlines and stuff like that. We kind of say, I've always booked America West and US Airways and now American.
Yeah.
Because in Phoenix, that's what you do, right? I mean, for whatever it's worth, if you can get ahead of the line, it's okay. So the airlines have this barrier thing, right? That by becoming, gold, at least you'll only spend 20 minutes as opposed to 80 minutes, right? In line and things of that nature, right? The barriers. But like you said, there are other just motivators which says, hey, wouldn't it just be convenient that if I just pulled up in a gas station, that the dang thing filled itself and, some hardware from here exchanged some tokens, some loyalty points maybe, and then, I just get to fill it and just walk away from there. So it greases the transaction, right? So that is another motivation. So we're kind of coming to this from a strictly loyalty perspective. So if you really think about loyalty points, you can kind of flip it, and it's no different in my mind than a cryptocurrency in many ways, because you're just exchanging some notion of some points for some goods and services, right? And it's a representation of these goods and services that you do. So a large auto company, for example, could be looking at, ultimately issuance of these points, not only where they encourage you to earn these points in every possible way, but potentially for their partners also to participate in this currency, right? With that auto company being the buyer of last resort, right? So there is an amount of stability that needs to be there. It needs to have value because not only them, but there's a whole ecosystem of people who will continue to value it and offer onion rings for 20 points. And as long as that goes on, it has intrinsic value, right? It has So it's many ways like a cryptocurrency. I can exchange it for some goods and services, and you could potentially spread it. Now that comes to the point as to, hey, would you just arbitrarily throw it open for anybody to do so that Ford can buy these points? And yeah, it's probably not. But in a more restricted way, how do I grease this? And especially things like, the auto companies who are saying, okay, if you are going to a competitor, in Uber, hey, at least pick a GM car, go to Hertz, pick a GM car because I'm going to reward you for that, right? So that kind of an ecosystem is what we believe could be valuable. And then there are a couple of other similar ideas is to even like proof of, like even award people for mobility, right? If you drive in a GM car for 50 miles, we'll give you 2 points, things like that. And so then we looked at, and clearly the side effect of this is back to what Brandon, you were saying earlier on, is Ethereum with its ability to execute a more logical set of constructs, right? So you can think about other examples where it is valuable to be in a growing network such as Ethereum, so that maybe there is a person selling insurance. Allianz could be selling insurance, which they do right now for your, Airbnb and stuff like that. And you could potentially be interacting with an Allianz smart contract, wherein the minute you step in, the contract executes and you are able to buy a 3-hour coverage based on your background, things are, there's even proof of identity and all these things that, to me, the
drive to Mexico and just get coverage.
Just for and the idea is to, if Ethereum takes off big enough, right, and there are enough, fintech products and insurance products and all these various types of products. For example, another area which is, I think, of great interest to automotive companies is fractional ownership. Things that, again, representation of any. If you're not going to buy a whole car, maybe you'll invest in this, car, like, $5,000, and that will give you maybe some benefits or some reduced rates, or you could make money off it just like any other financial instruments, right? So they're looking at
almost like a timeshare.
Exactly. Yeah.
Resort timeshares.
And one of the guys that I was talking to, said, hey, wouldn't that be cool to do in a blockchain because, of the ease of execution over time, right? And such a massive number of contracts, you can't possibly have lawyers and others. You don't need to worry about, something going down and up or, all those usual things that is valuable for. So with that in mind, we said, okay, I've been talking about it. So how easy is it to do a quick, as to stand up what I call, we call cryptocurrency, loyalty points, whatever the case may be. And it's surprisingly way different than where we left off, So literally, these are the steps that I had to follow in order to get a basic loyalty point / cryptocurrency setup. You literally download the wallet, the latest version of Ethereum's wallet comes completely packaged in with get client, so it basically acts as a node. It took only an hour, and I'll start playing the video of how this is done. Create a couple of accounts being your wallets essentially, right? Your private wallets. You could have a series of accounts. One of them gets funded, which is your big, the mothership, right? So when you throw a contract into Ethereum, you can have all the seed values by which it can be fed, and you can, there are options to feed it later and so on. But the contract executes and establishes whatever number of points in your wallet, so to speak. And now you can use the wallet essentially to transact between various accounts. If you had a wallet and I know your address, it's no different than how Bitcoin transactions take place. And with the addition of having some smarts, you could interact with other contracts potentially. So I just took the steps to basically set this up, create a couple of contracts, and then and then be able to establish a base which said, okay, I'm going to have a new coin called Dojo Points. My daughter, goes to third grade and she earns Dojo Points for being a good student, I guess. And
Nice.
that's why I named that Dojo Points. And so you can put it between wallets, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. So I'll go through that, and so the steps are vastly so much easier than some of the things that you had to go through. Admittedly, you had the whole mining thing set up and things like that.
It's easier.
But
now, the wallet is like
the wallet
GUI
was
and everything,
was real easy to get going, and then of course the trick is in the smart contract, how you code, and we can go over some of the code just to kind of get a feel for what it is. It's just like a regular high-level programming language that you can code in with all this. And then I have a series of questions that I just would like the group to kind of discuss some of these things, right? So if we really take it to the next level and talk about scalability, cost of doing these transactions, how would we build something and scale it out? And that's really what this is. So let me start off by actually playing, like what you said, Bryan, is the idea is because things get to be flaky in here. So I started off very simply by downloading the wallet. So it's very simple. You can download the wallet. It's right there, and go to ethereum.org, download the wallet. Of course, the wallet says it's Mac says it's not properly signed and all that. So you need to do a control, click on it, and it'll say, hey, this is unsigned. We don't know who these guys are and all that. I say, fine, so I just wanted to point that out. And there it comes up, right? So you have the choice of switching between the test and the real network. I chose the test net because in order to do anything, as you know, in Ethereum, you need to earn some couple of ethers. And with this, you can mine right away and you get a couple of ethers, just enough. I mean, you have one ether, that's good enough. In the 1 or 2 hours that I kept it running, it earned 5 or 6, plenty enough for us to play around it.
Test ones?
Yeah, this is testnet. So when you open the wallet, it gave you the option, and there it is. As you can see, it says, hey, you want to go, and before you do anything else, 2 things have to happen. The node has to get established. It needs to get all the blocks, and in the test block, I think it's only like a gig worth. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time. So it takes about 45 minutes to download everything. And see, there it is. You can see 6,400 of 913,000 blocks, right? And and then it says, hey, just have to wait and do, so you can just wait. So you do two things, right? One, you get it set up, join up to the test network, create a password which generates your private key and what they call your, I think, the Ether base account, the base account from which you operate from. And so that's your primary wallet. You can now create as many accounts. So I created a second account so that I can move stuff between these 2 accounts, so to speak, right? So that I can, demonstrate how it would work in the real world, right? Yeah. So I think that was it at that point in time. So that's it. So you just have to wait to do this. So we will pause here. And then the next step really is open the application. Let it come up. So as you can see, bring it up. So you can launch the application. So, and as you can see, I had created 2 accounts. There is the main account, and a secondary account. So that's pretty much it, so that's it. So once you have gotten the node set up, and then once you have gotten basically the application installed, then you're pretty much ready to move forward, right? You can create as many accounts as you want and so on, right? Now nothing stops you. There's another one. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There is, you can go create there's a client-side wallet. There is one called Ether wallet or something like that. You can go create accounts there, and as long as you have the account ID, you could pass back and forth Ethers or Dojo points or whatever the case may be that you plan to do. So we are back again, and I'm going to just start mining. So it's a quick thing just to show you where you can mine, right? So to hunt around to see, hey, there it is, So, and it starts mining in there. And in reality, this is really a full-blown, like I said, so that's it. This is just, that's where you start mining. So, and I think I have a couple others which are more interesting. So step 4, so we started mining. And so this one is just your main account, right? So the Ether base. So as you can see, after about an hour or so, I got 5 Ethers that I mined, right? I have enough grease now that I can start moving things around, because to do anything in the blockchain, I need to pay the piper a little bit, it's just a few little Ethers, that I need to spend. So there it is. So you can see that I have 5 Ethers. That's good enough for me. You need at least one or a fraction of it to just get going. Because every transaction, as you will see, whether I do a contract or if I send money to your wallet, I need to grease it with a little bit of Ether. And if an Ether is not tied to it, it's not going to get executed. At least that's how it is right now. So I was able to go to the testnet.etherscan.io, where you can look at all transactions, and I was able to put my account ID, and then I was able to pull in, and it said, hey, this guy has got, and that's the account ID that I have. Yeah. So we have done a couple of things, right? We started the network. We are able to create our own accounts. I've mined some Ether. So I'm loaded. The gun is loaded right now for me to actually do and maybe create a cryptocurrency, right? So number 5, this is the meat of it, right? So if you go to ethereum.org, there is obviously I've just taken the example code, right? Which is the whole idea of a smart contract and how you can deploy this smart contract. And we'll look over the code a little bit here, but we can just watch this for a few seconds. And basically what it is when you deploy this piece of code, it does a couple of things. It initializes the amount of whatever it is that, cryptocurrency, whatever you want to call it. I call it Dojo points, right? You can specify the amount so that when the contract, it's almost like your, basically initialization, right? So essentially,
filling a bucket.
Yeah, just filling the bucket, right? Yeah, you bootstrap it. So when you bootstrap it, you say, okay, here's my main account, right? I've deployed this contract tied to this main account. It's because he needs that Ether, he needs that lifeline in order to do anything at all. And he's going to load this account up with what I call 10,000 Dojo points. That's the universe that I'm starting. You can run. I just wanted to point out that both the locations, just back to the reason for, I just paused it here for a second, is essentially the directories, pretty much everything that you had, other, like a get client is available here, So you can go and run your get command if you wanted. Right. The only thing I found is if you try to run it, when you have the wallet up, it's running it. So it says, hey, something else is already running. So that's it.
Is that like in the library directory?
Yeah, it's in. So the library Ethereum actually has the actual, the actual node data in it, and then right wherever in the application directory you have the, you have the actual code itself. So the node data is stored in library Ethereum, and if
What's
you
interesting too is that the GUI that you downloaded and so easy to install and everything. One thing that's kind of fun about that is it's a Node.js, it's a Node.js WebKit based GUI and all that. So it acts like a native app and everything, but in reality it's the same code, right? So remember when all the stuff I pulled up and I had to start the node from the
Yes.
terminal and everything. It's the same code. It's just wrapped in a nice Mac OS that it's needed.
Yeah. So if you look at this, right, I just dropped in the applications folder. So the get is the Ethereum wallet.app, contents, frameworks, node, get. So you go to that path, and now your get client. So if you want to do like what Bryan showed, so you can just shut this dang thing down and just run your get commands, and you can do get minus console and all these things. And when we first looked at how we did this, God, you got to painfully copy the address, and if you missed a byte,
Yes.
But the nice thing now is you have a GUI. You saw that, it tells you account 1. You can call it monkey if you want, and it's a far more friendlier kind of a face on the same execution. So for regular experimentation, it is far easier than trying to go to the command line and do this. I mean, it just doesn't take much to, there's no programming required on this particular piece. So anyway, I think that was that. So did I?
So is that from your on Ethereum.org, another example about how you're creating a cryptocurrency of your own?
Yeah, so that's coming up.
It's
coming up. So I'm just trying I was just trying to show the directories first, so that.
No, cool.
So I did a quick, so just to say in the testnet, the data is, the chain data is only like a gig or so, right? 900 MB. So it's relatively quick and doesn't take like 14 hours or anything like that. I mean, this thing in like an hour you can have it running very comfortably. Yeah. So I just typed in a few things. So I think we are coming to the meat of it. It's not, so you'll see here in just a second. So this is the main code, right? And I'll go over the code a little bit here in a few seconds, but I think I'll be showing how to deploy the code in a contract, right? And the code is not that great. So there it is. So go to contracts, deploy a new contract. I mean, this is the meat of it in order for you to deploy the contract.
So for people who aren't familiar with the code, it's called Solidity, right?
Yeah, this is this, and while there are a couple of other variants like Serpent and a few others, Solidity is the code which is executed in here. So it's a high-level programming language, just like anything else. And that is your Solidity IDE, so to speak, and your compiler, essentially, which converts this. So as you can see, I'm just going to paste the code in there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that it comes right in the wallet.
Yep, it's all right in the wallet. And Bryan, there is a setting in the wallet, I think I showed some maybe a little bit later, where you can go and put it in the debug mode. I think it's developer tool. So you can see all the bytecode getting generated. You can do the pushes and pops and all these things. So it's basically a stack machine, right? And you can see the underlying bytecode that is in place.
Yeah.
And that really what is stored in the blockchain for others to execute. And every time it executes, you're going to spend some ether, right? Because they're not going to do it for free for you. So that's an interesting concept in here. So look at this, right? So there is a constructor, right? So if you have a contract called Mahesh, you can build a constructor called Mahesh and provide it a series of initializers, right? Hey, that's what I'm saying. I'm going to have 100,000 points, and I'm going to call it dojo points because you needed something. I needed a symbol. You can put a percentage, dollar, whatever, right? And I just called it a dojo. Number of decimal units is going to be 2, right? I mean, you can make it 19, you know. Again, back to some of our earlier conversations. That's the advantage of these. You know, it's not even, you know, I mean, like, is Bitcoin finite, right? I mean, it depends on how you look on the number line. You know, if you look down to a Satoshi, it's practically infinite, right? Because 100 million is one Bitcoin means then, you know, 21 million multiplied by 100 million is whatever, quadrillion, trillion. So there it is. So that's the amount of ether it's going to take to deploy this. So the compiler pre-calculates the amount of ether, and when you deploy it, they will only take as much as it is supposed to. And I'm not sure exactly how, how a miner is truthful in saying, oh, I just need this much. So I'm not sure exactly, but that's what it says. So this is what I'm saying. So I have to give my account password. Remember, a contract is tied to my account. I got to spend that 5 ether, you know, something from that 5 ether. So I am giving him my private key, which is here in the wallet. I'm putting my password in, and boom, it's able to deploy the contract. And there it is. So you can see, make sense? So as you can see, this is like anything else. Remember, when I deployed this contract, I have to get 12 confirmations in order for this to be accepted, right? It's like same Bitcoin thing and Ether. And so this is no different. So I'm waiting for this dang thing to get 12 confirmations. Speed and so on and something else. So think about this, right? So we did this. So imagine if you build some software on top of this enough so that these steps can be executed in a user-friendly way, right? Say, how many points do you want, right? And so you can instantiate somebody, a new client, practically with no, you know, and with just a cheat sheet, right? Which says, hey, this is what you need to do, right? So you can provision. So remember, in order to deploy this, I spent 0.01 of my ether. I mean, this is a test net. Yeah. I earned it by mining. But if I ran the real net, I got to fund this.
Right.
So this is a fundamental point, guys, so that I have brought up. So what does this mean? So we have to have a source of funding for this, right? Because if all your 100,000 customers had a wallet and they wanted to come and spend the money with anybody, right? Every time they spend, when they send a transaction which says take 30 dojo points and send it to this iced tea company in here, they better grease it with something. So you have to, I mean, there is already discussion, you know, when you first gave him the dojo point, like, so let's say I'm GM and I had these 100,000 dojo points, I'm going to send a little ether with you.
Yeah.
So that when you spend up for 50 transactions, there is enough ether. I got to fill you up, because you're not going to spend it, right? On the flip side, for a company like this, even them, they have to spend some ether. They have to do the same to their customers. Why? That's what they do today. They pay American Express 5 percentage points or 2.5 percentage point or Square. And the theory is that ether is still cheaper than that 2.5%, right? That's where I have my concern, right? Because ether itself is such a high like fluctuating and tradable entity. If I built my whole world on this with the assumption that an ether is 0.001 pennies and then it turns out to be 0.01 pennies,
yeah,
my numbers have just gone wacky, right? And that's where I'm a little if you listen to this guy Vitalik, he says, well, then we'll only charge 0.0001 ether for each of my transactions, right? Isn't that what he's saying?
I think, yeah, because this where they have this thing. So like the gas, there's this thing called the gas price, which we talked about before, and it's basically like, so I think the reason they did that had to do with this. So like when you want to do something with a contract and you're spending this ether, they actually account for it with something called gas, which has like a fluctuating. There's like a fluctuating ratio of gas to ether. So gas isn't just another subset of ether. It's not like a penny is to a dollar. it actually can change, and it's sort of like how transaction fees in Bitcoin, right, fluctuate. So if miners don't feel like let's say early on when miners were earning so much Bitcoin and there weren't that many people using Bitcoin, you could basically use Bitcoin for free because they didn't care if they got a mining fee, they were getting less Bitcoin, and it was like one transaction per 5 minutes or whatever, you know. But now the Bitcoin is more is being used more and everything. The fees are a little bit higher, even though as you noticed, like I was just messing this like last night, it was like 2 cents. So even though Bitcoin has obviously gotten really popular, and there have been fluctuations in that thing, even though the price of Bitcoin has gone up a lot, my transaction fee has stayed in the
that's the
penny range. And I think that's what will happen, because that's going to be the miners, which in this case are also the people that run your smart contracts.
correct.
Okay, are going to be incentivized to make it be a reasonable price. Otherwise, they're pricing themselves out of the job.
One thing to notice: the transaction. I mean, the contract itself, it's got an address like anything else,
Right.
and I could go and again go back to my etherscan.io. I'm on the testnet. Oh, something happened there, but you could go and search for that particular. Yeah, there it is. So yeah, I think I lost the connection for a second. So I pasted it and I'm able to see it. Okay, so I think that kind of covers the basics of, hey, we got it set up, we got it funded. The contract is a real living thing. It got accepted and put on the blockchain, right? And now comes the final and fun part, which is people giving money to each other, right? And now this could be you to the company, you to whosoever. So now we come to the fun part, right? How do you send funds from one wallet to the other? And so as you can see, I am taking the main wallet, and so first thing I'm going to do is, let's just pause for 1 second. So just because I haven't coded that piece so I created my main account and a second account, right? In order for me to use the second account to send money to a third account, right? The second account needs a little ether. So first I just sent a little bit of ether over to that account, right? But this is technologically, we have to, we have to program it in such a way, and maybe that we'll do that again.
Because one thing you could do is you could pre-fund an account. So you would
That's
know
right.
the private key, but you could make them aware of that as like this is your starter account. And
That's right.
There's some way to, if they had an app that could take that bootstrap account and put it into an account, which they use private key you get or something. So you can seed them with a private
exactly.
Private key has a little bit of
and that's the advantage of the contracts too, right? For example, if you are running out of ether, right, I could just take 2 points from you, very small, and fund you some more ether, right? So, there are a couple of ways in which you can program this so that it makes it easy for them. So here it is, I'm sending 1 ether over to that second account. So this is really not as interesting, but this is just so that we can actually do this stuff. But let's go over to the pièce de résistance, which is to transfer dojo points, right? That's all I'm interested in, Ether is all great. Somebody else did that. Yeah. This is what I did, So here it is, right? So you have 2 accounts, and we'll go over that. I have a main account. He's got some ether to spend, but forget about the ether. But he's got dojo points. This guy is fat. He's got 100,000 dojo points. And I think the cheapskate is only going to send 1,000 over to account 1. And later on, you'll see that he expects 500 back because I guess account 1 got some value out of it, right? So that's pretty much it. But this is a pretty straightforward transaction which can be executed in a smartphone. But all those questions come to mind, right? So then I know we're getting late in here. So in 10 minutes, we can try to cover some so we can watch this thing. So as you see, sorry. So here is account 1. So I'm going to copy his address, right? Because I'm going to send from my main account to the second account, right? And obviously in a real world, right, this would be more easier, right? Nobody's copying accounts, and there must be an easier way where you tap something and then.
This is just a horrible UI. All the stuff going on underneath can all be on one phone.
That's right. So I'm transferring 1,000 points, which is what, you would allow that, right? You punch in, hey, yeah, these three things cost 1,000 points. I'm punching in 1,000 points and it needs to go to this account. That account, and today even we have QR codes, right? You can put a QR code of this account. You can just scan that thing and say, okay, I'm sending it to this, right? I mean, so it's pretty usable. I mean, a little bit.
This is like the power user.
There it is. I posted it. It's 1,000 points. It's on its way. It's waiting for one of 12 confirmations. A couple of confirmations later, then you're ready to rock and roll. He's got 1,000 points. He provided some valuable service, obviously, so he's got 1,000 points. And later on, I'll just show an addition to this where he transfers 500 points from his account back to the other. So look at this. So I'm sending 500 back.
Guys, let's
Isn't taking the CPU time to do that. That costs a lot.
So this is sending 500 back to the original account, right? So I mean, you can think about an infinity of accounts, and of course, since I own both accounts, I have to authorize it.
And now your most efficient way to do blocks is with specialized chips, not even GPUs.
So as you can see, waiting for one more transaction, and if this gets confirmed, so you can see, I moved an Ether, I moved 1,000 points, it's back. I mean, I'm moving back 500 points. So this is essentially your, back and forth.
Understands that natively, but just was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because they knew people would want to do this in Ethereum, and they put it right in the wallet.
Yep, they put it right in the wallet, right?
That's cool.
So then, but then what happens to but then in order to run the program, you got to buy so much Ether.
Yes.
And that's what causes the value of Ether to go up.
That's
So
right.
Sure.
That's where people
It's
would
really, if it was that, I think there's two things going on right now. There's just speculation, like all things, just like Bitcoin, there's speculative money coming into this saying, oh, all these people are going to bring some crazy stuff, though it's going to be extremely valuable. So
this has, I could think of 10 applications that you
right.
can use.
So the Ether is supposed
Right now.
to just grease it, right? So the Ether itself is having some fluctuation in value, but the theory is that over time, the cost per transaction will be relatively low. Those are the kind of things which really brings us, it's a good segue into a couple of things that I was just thinking of, right? So in order for me to create 100,000 wallets, like you go to I'm assuming that you'd have a farm, each one of them being a node, just like an app server, right? And then you would have this huge farm of nodes that can service all these people, because as you saw, it's kind of slow to settle everything, right? And what is the block time? Typically, it's a minute in.
Well, Ethereum is 16 seconds.
Seconds, right?
It's not typically trusted as a confirmed, So 16 seconds per block, but usually, apps wait a few blocks.
Exactly. So like 12 confirmations it takes a minute, right? So, and I don't know if you guys have come across any technologies where, we can't wait that long, I mean, the most of this chip stuff right now is forcing 30-second response times, which is not acceptable, right? I mean, people are used to 2-second response times.
This will come. The terminal vendors are having a hard time with that code. It should only take 13 seconds, but it's not happening.
But for
the
us,
16-second block, in reality, the one confirmation for your 100 loyalty points that are worth 17 cents or $3 or whatever is probably, like a risk reward scenario. That 16-second one confirmation is probably good enough 99.9999%
That's right.
of the time. Unless you're buying a car, you want to make sure you get your loyalty points that add up to be worth $2,000 or something, and you might want to stick around the teller until you get your 12 confirmations. But I would say usually people are going to just
just eat it, right? Yeah.
My Starbucks card, I go and buy something like Starbucks card, and guarantee you my Starbucks card.
I know why.
There's a way that you can live through that.
Yeah.
I mean,
The question would be, is there a difference in processing time between dojo points and ethers?
No, not really. It's essentially the same, right? It's the confirmation on the block.
Yeah.
So there's really no difference as far as that's concerned. And so I've thought about there has to be some, so again, it's the risk versus reward thing, right?
Yeah.
So if I consider it closed,
Yeah.
right? So if I run this, and if I consider it closed, right? Because like most of the time, if the transaction cost is so low, it happens all the time today in Visa networks and stuff. Oh, power is out. Okay, let me do this. I'll do this. He runs that thing, and right, because there's a fundamental time of 16 seconds, let's say, and that's not going to get to be 1 second, right? So we have to have another layer of technology where we can assume certain amount of risk and call the transaction settled and asynchronously settled behind the scenes, and later go back and reclaim, or it's part of doing business, right?
Well,
So we have to come up with some.
in this example, thinking through how we might be able to handle it, if a user's wallet, our customer's wallet, is essentially their public key, anytime they use their wallet, they could conceivably get updated. It's possible. They could be anywhere that participates.
Right.
They could get updated, and they would know, oh yeah, okay, so that happened. Good. That showed up. Because for me, if I don't see points on my Starbucks card for 2 days,
That's kind of how I think.
they went and updated the API again. Good for them. Somebody made a boo-boo. I don't see it for 3 days. I think, I'm going to have to give it a couple more because if it's on fire, calling while it's on fire doesn't really help anybody.
We know exactly how Starbucks works, so because we all work on those systems, and it's only settled every night, right? So because we have an engine which runs and computes all these.
They stopped updating at 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm buying my veggies. So
Right.
That's a nice touch, but nonetheless, there's probably a way to allow that near real time process.
Yes.
That unfortunately means a fair amount of security problems.
So what I have seen, and we'll probably, if somebody comes across, be great, because I know the fintech companies. Accenture did a massive experiment with the blockchain with Ethereum, and they were able to get it at speeds that Wall Street is used to, right? I mean, these guys talk about nanoseconds and microseconds and stuff.
Yeah.
So somebody will crack that problem.
Yeah.
And put it into, by the way, that Ethereum is actually available in Azure, in Microsoft, and you can stand up a server with all this pre-built and start your experiment right then and there. So I'm going to assume that one of them will solve the scalability and the speed of execution problem.
Yeah. Another thing about speed is the whole, Stellar and Ripple, one of their big benefits claims is that their settlement times are like 1 to 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So there are other, it's a lot more complicated. It's not just simple like, hey, it's a really secure blockchain and it's a 1 to 3 second confirmation time. It works differently than Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Correct.
It is interesting that their confirmation times are so fast. So that's something to think about. Maybe that can be a settlement layer.
And if that is, for loyalty, it might not be that tantamount, because at the end of the day, it's not like real currency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, God, like you're ready to wait 3 days.
Customer,
You haven't had to deal with an irate
you're there, and
That's
you
right.
don't see it show up. You're walking out the door, and you're like, usually this shows up. You can just go back and be like, hey, am I going to get my points? If they say no, go to hell. You're just not going to get your points. I mean,
Yeah, I know. So we might get away with a little bit more leeway in there.
Yeah.
So your company, are you focused on Ethereum in your company, or what
We
is
are
your company?
we haven't decided on the technology. We're leaning more and more towards Ethereum, simply because a lot of people are on it, and the ability to do this solidity and programming, the smart contracts. If there's a large enough ecosystem supporting it, it's definitely worth the try, right? I mean, I would certainly consider it for our first kind of experimental, proof of concept kind of thing.
Also, I've been to 3 meetings to talk about blockchain. All anybody wants to talk about is Ethereum.
Right. So there's a lot of
There's a lot of value to it. It's an interesting concept. The contracts are what everybody focuses on. But some are just chasing the next insanely great thing. This will be the one that will all I think.
Yeah, the jury is always out on these things, but that's what we are leaning towards. And that's the reason why we come to these things, to hear some contrarian opinions and other kind of things, right? No, I remember you had brought up a good point, Russ. You don't have to. there are some problems which are solved extremely well, which is run extremely well. I mean, we work for one of these companies. We worked on loyalty. It's based on a single central set of machines owned by a private company, and they can run it, and it solves the problem. The value of any of these is, can you explode this? I mean, if you look at the limitations of what it is today, and how do you, if you assume, just close your eyes to say, okay, if I have to start fresh, and if I can say, take advantage of every little leakage of points that are just sitting around there unused, open up the concept of, can everybody afford to do a loyalty point? Is it affordable enough that they can get into it at a low price point? Then it starts to ask some further questions, right? Then, nobody's buying some enterprise software and 50 servers and doing all these things, right? So that's the kind of thinking that, hey, if this is truly a decentralized, not only a trustless trust environment, but also a decentralized compute environment at the cost of a few ether, then this might be something that could potentially explode into massive usage beyond just, the big companies. So that's the...
This is several orders of magnitude cheaper than anything else you might.
Right. I mean, because we have done loyalty systems, and we know how much money was thrown in, every project, every phase of these projects at Southwest and American are all 30, 40, 50 million. I'm sure it's the same at
It's hard
Amex.
to overestimate that.
That's right. So there's a ton of money spent. So you don't even open an account unless you had this. Now, there are other players who can do it cheaper, and Salesforce can probably do it, but still pretty expensive. So, even those are extremely expensive. So I look at it as a cost and barrier to entry solution, as opposed to fundamentally the trust being one part of it. But a lot of things, again, there are so many other interactive pieces which is attractive to these companies, like the execution of other contracts that we can interact with. I think those are more esoteric, and probably we'd have to look for that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I could play with this to the point that I could be building live contracts on Ethereum and play with myself, use phone apps, play with myself here to just transfer my own.
Like what we did just now.
Yeah, and we're talking about such a small transaction cost. I could blow $10 on an ether, and that would last me for a while.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
You learn how, and it would be my little universe to just deal with it.
And not only that, right? So you can connect to the testnet, and you don't have to pay a dime. You can earn the ether in a few minutes.
Now you just took $79.
That's right.
Yeah.
All it now is time and some cycles on the machine.
You can even use the whole the mix IDE. I talked with that last time I gave talk, and you can even
get your own private chain, right?
Your own private blockchain. So right from within this GUI, it allows you to add new block, change the Genesis block parameters. You can even go to
and
that
then
level.
Bryan showed that.
Yeah.
And that would be well worth setting up, right? Because then, see, right now, in order for me to do anything, and the reason why Bryan insists on recording is if we don't have good connectivity, you can't do squat here, because it is really based on the number of other guys, and me having some connectivity to be able to settle. But let's say you want it to be so private, so I don't even want anybody to know. You can do that.
Fast.
Yeah.
And
fast, right?
With your own private.
Absolutely, it will settle like that.
You don't really have
you can set up test scripts that just run, and they're not even hitting the real test, they're just running and making sure your contract does. Because that's some problems that I see. It's if you're going to get serious about this sort of thing, you need automated test suites that make sure your contract works under all kinds of different conditions and everything. I think some of the big guys people that are really into this are doing it.
And that's what they I saw some numbers from that test by on Ethereum at typical, right? Some 5,000 transactions a second, and things of that nature, right? So I was curious to see
behind the contract to do, right? Some companies might want to be wide open, some companies want to.
Yeah, and that's some of the things, right? We talked about it, and I'm not 100% clear in my head yet as to the security of my code, right? So in order for a node to execute, and we might have touched on this topic before, right?
Yep.
It's a series of opcodes,
Yes.
but a reverse, I mean, a decompiler is easy to write. I'm sure somebody's already written one for most of these, right? And you know what it is, right? So yeah, I
think that's the thing. Like the theory of these smart contracts is that actually, like you take the DAO that I mentioned, this DAOhub.org or whatever, this new they have a complicated smart contract that's that's supposed to run the DAO, but it also is running this like crowdfunding thing and everything. But when you go to Coin, what was that site you're going to?
Or
whatever.com. When you go there and you look at that contract's address, it even has like the tab for contracts, and then you can see the source code. Now that source code's not in the blockchain, the compiled version of it is, but it's out there because the company actually wants to publish it. So
correct.
Just like Linux is open source, right? And a lot of the popular Bitcoin wallets are open source. It's like they're open source so that people can look at it.
Right.
So I think that's, I mean, you could have your own private smart contract that you do restrict the source, but then it's like people don't, right? And you want to sell it to a company, at least if you have to show it to the company you want to sell the service to.
Yes, that this is what is.
You'll just after like 5 years, pow, all the money just like goes to you or something.
Yeah, you could, right?
You wouldn't know.
There's no security
Right.
income.
But
So,
the point being, like, could it be auditable or something, or could
yeah,
it be private audits, right?
Yeah, and that's where people like
something.
consensus, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I look at it, right?
Yeah.
If I did this work for any company, I'd probably have to pay consensus to come in and say, you know what, there's no hole in here.
Yeah.
This thing is just fine, right? He's just put an array in here and that will securely store this. And if you look at the transfer function, which is the most important, right?
Yeah.
Which says, hey, does the sender have the enough balance?
Right.
And is he not put in a minus so that you can suck that out? And things, it does some basic checks.
Yeah.
And I would expect, if I got to play Vitalik $500 an hour to look over my code, I'll do it, right? I mean, whatever it takes, right? If I have to pay him $10,000, let him take a look at this damn thing and say, there's a gaping hole in there, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can have code inspections and all these things, and these are all other avenues to enrich yourself, right? And if you're really good at this, maybe you can become one. But so if you look at the code itself, it's pretty straightforward. That's what I just wanted to quickly touch. It's not. So if you look at this, right, this is what. So you have a contract, and then here is essentially the pieces that I said, right, which just comes out. So if you specify in the contract that that these are all these are all the tokens that essentially are going to be, they are all public, right? And though you pretty much initialize them right in here, right? And so this is the Genesis execution, So this is like typical object-oriented programming, right? An object is getting instantiated. And this is the constructor for that specific object. And in the constructor is all the initial code, give myself 100,000 or 1 million or whatever the case may be, right? And anything else, the name, the other variables that define your contract, right? And then it is just a set of functions, right? Just like any other classic. So no different at all than if you ever written Java or C++ or anything, an object, set of public storage, and a set of functions that act upon and manipulate this so that it can store or display what's it that you got. And then they have a set of they showed one other piece like these events, right? And this is meant for the wallet, right? So that he can interact, so that when you go to the wallet and say, hey, here's my account, how the heck did he get, right? Remember, the contract is no different than a wallet, and I could go to the contract address. How did he know? He called this. So that's essentially, maybe 50 lines of code that defined your cryptocurrency.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's it.
Thank
you.
Morpheus, the the thing with these, it's okay. Because you're thinking of like cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, right? You're on the Bitcoin blockchain, you have Bitcoins, right? You're on the Ethereum blockchain, you have Ether. Like you need separate wallets and stuff to do stuff with those things. This is like, it's the movie Inception, when they go down the different levels in the dream. This is a little bit like that. So this is the level, the first dream level, which is like the Ether and the Bitcoins, okay? The next dream level is where we're at with having these dojo points in this contract. Ethereum's here, and Ethereum will always be here. Now, the smart contract that's inside Ethereum is actually what's managing these dojo points.
100,000
So
dojo
they're not
points
a
that I
separate
floated.
blockchain. They are basically like beans being, bean counting, right? At this level, you have Ether being bean counted by the Ethereum blockchain. Once you're in the smart contract level, the smart contract is doing the bean
It's
counting.
like another
of these
blockchain
dojo.
inside of blockchain.
That's right.
Sort of, yeah.
It is kind of. So if you think about it, right, this blockchain has some arbitrary data, right, attached to it. This arbitrary data is attached to this contract. So it's important to understand that this concept of a wallet can be just an account or a contract, which is kind of like a wallet, right?
Yeah.
So it has its unique address and it has its own private storage where it's keeping track of all this. It said that, hey, this is 100,000 and you got 50,000 of this and so on and so forth. Because this is a programming language, you could potentially put functions in there so that you can feed it later and say, you know what, every week I'm going to add another. You could have various ways to do this, right? So if GM floated so many points, gave it to you, you bought a car, you exchanged it, and 200 points came back, they could take it back and pop it back in here to keep that currency constant, right? I mean, just almost like how your regular currency works. It circulates around and ends up with somebody, right? So they could fill the coffers. So it's not a monotonically decreasing thing, but they could keep refilling the coffers. They could slightly inflate it, right? I mean, today, essentially, we have worked in loyalty systems. So if you look at Siebel loyalty is used behind Starbucks, American Airlines, all these things, Southwest, and we have worked on a couple of these systems. And the way the Siebel loyalty and all that is set up is, you got to have the score of 10 million points or something, how many ever, so that it's an accounting thing, right? So the CFO knows how much is he hemorrhaging. So there's a value assigned to it, and then they decide to, increase, decrease, or limit, or that's where they start to say, oh my God, people are just going crazy here. Our liability is so high that we need to do something. Just slam them all, Tell them that it's now 40,000 points to go from here. They make these adjustments, right?
And you can have point blocks for each program. Each loyalty program, this is the point block it's going to have.
Well, it's interesting too, because some of the cases maybe that people were bringing up, you could, if you were to implement this program, you could maybe do things like have certain classes of smart contracts. And so some company could say, hey, we're a blue certified loyalty program, and everybody would understand that means that they'll never get inflated, for example, or something. Whereas if they were yellow certified or something, inflatable, something like that. I don't know, it'd be interesting. You could, not that everybody would understand what was really happening, but as long as they sort of understood what the different classes were, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're putting
Exactly.
some governance into that.
Yeah.
So you basically were talking about forming little confederations.
Sort of, yeah. I guess
Decide
right.
they
Each
want to get
currency
together and
has
do
its own. Yeah, each one has its own smart contracts, and as long as they can play with each other, and but they could follow different rules, I guess, as long as it's some fundamental rules. That's cool. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. More basic.
I guess my question is the contract, what is the contract based on? In your example here.
the contract is simply a piece of code which says, okay, and it doesn't do a whole lot right now other than provide the ability for a few functions, right? For example, it first loads me up with 100,000. So I made myself rich by saying
You have 100,000
Points
His points.
of my points. So think about this.
Dojo points.
Yeah, I just call them dojo
Right, okay,
points,
well,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
you
call
have
it
100,000 dojos.
to my main account. So if it was a company, right, that's what they'll start with. Hey, here's my main account. I'm going to fund myself
Got
with
it.
100,000.
Right.
So now I'm going to start distributing it. For example, right? Let us say that you are an airline and you start with 1 million points, right? You funded yourself. Then you told all your guys, or magically in their app, you made available a wallet for each one of them, right? And you funded each one of those wallets. So remember, this is just like this is just like Bitcoin, right? I have to have a source and a destination, and I take from the source, and then I issue a command, right? And I can say, hey, give this to Morpheus, and give this to Ashish, and give this to Brian, and give this to Brandon, right? So I'm now reducing that 100,000. So each one of you have 100, 200, 300, whatever the case may be. Once you have that, right, you guys are on your own, right? You can come to me, and I can give you a car or a discount on a car. Or if this is valuable enough, you guys go spend it in somebody else who's ready to take it. A dealership which might let you rent a car. I mean, there's a whole series of, so that's essentially what we have done by deploying this contract, right? So, and you can make it more sophisticated to do other things. For example, flip it on its head, right? And so I have 100,000 points in my wallet, right? Or whatever. Let's say I have an account, I have 100 points, and I want to spend it here. And if these guys, all I need is an account, right? They have an account, but it's not a simple account, right? Theirs is actually a smart contract that this restaurant has deployed in there, and it has some kind of a rule. And one of the rules is, if it's between 8 and 9, these guys are really hungry. Take them to the cleaners, right? It's like 100 points, right? If these guys came in for the 4 p.m. special, we cut them, it's only 50 points, right? I mean, you can encode that rule right there, and it can just charge you that many points, right? So potentially, a smart contract can be much more than, oh, just give me 50 points, right? So a simple technique might be, somebody gives you a menu and you say, oh, this is 80 points, so let me give you 80 points, right? And it just goes to you. Or you send it and then it computes it.
Or you could say, hey, if you come to Walmart at a certain, during rush hour, we give you less points. But if you come in the middle of the night, then we'll give you more points.
And it's the vice versa, right? I mean, it's exactly the same. So either by rewarding them the same points, or you can accept points. So let's say you didn't have points, but instead this company wants to participate magically in this auto network for whatever reason. So they would buy a block of points and keep it in their wallet, right? And then just because you paid hard cash or Bitcoin to buy your food, he might say, you know what, Morpheus, you get 5 points. And I'm going to credit to you right now. So that's the other thing, the instantaneous gratification of, he'll credit to you. As soon as your money goes in, the $50 that you spent tonight, you immediately see 5 points show up in your wallet. It's right there.
These, so if you had like Dojo points and Dodo points and all these other different things, would you need to have a different wallet to handle all those different?
That's the thing. If everybody is using Ethereum, a single wallet could potentially do it.
Right, but if you have your own currency, if you create your own money, then would you have to have a different wallet?
Yeah,
I mean, those are not. You couldn't exchange those points directly for Ethereum. That's just something that you could exchange for something else
in an exchange.
in that network.
That's
and
right.
If I wanted to buy those points because I needed some points to go buy
Sure.
something in the other network, I could buy them, and then perhaps there would be somebody that would facilitate that exchange.
So like today, that's what you do, right? You go to Coinbase, or you use Jax, or I know you know. Hey, all right. Hey, thanks a lot. So we'll talk later, Brandon. We get caught up. Yeah. So yeah, that's really, those are all application specific things, right? So clearly we'll issue a wallet.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what you were saying. I think you can, from within this same wallet, You can have multiple. First of all, you can have multiple accounts in the
That's
same
right.
wallet, and they act like the separate entities. So if you wanted to keep your smart contracts separate,
That's right.
you could have a different account in your wallet for each smart contract. But I think you can also have smart contracts in the same. I don't know. I have to play that one, but
Yeah.
but at least you can have different accounts in the same wallet.
Exactly, and if you are sharing the same network, right, like Ethereum, you could potentially have all your different points. You know, everybody just magically just used only Ethereum. You could. The motivation, it depends on each guy, right? So I conceive of this as, you know, every time you have a loyalty system, you're going to have some kind of an app. So, you know, whether it's on the web or it is a compiled app, something like that, right? So which we can build a client which will let you focus on the points that you have gained in this network, right? But again, there will be others through who can exchange these, right? And who will make a living out of it because they run an exchange and they can, on Ethereum, there'll be 100 different guys who offer these services. One of them might give Mahesh's Dojo points slightly higher, and there'll be another app which will go and mine all this and say, hey, this guy is giving a really good deal today. And you know how the whole ecosystem can balance itself.
Yeah.
So ultimately, everybody will be offering the same exchange rates.
Cool. I just
You
So
can.
you can use your own coin. So if you want to be a Chevy guy,
Right.
you'd have your own coin versus Ford, they have their own coin. And then in order to sign up in the Ford one or the Chevy one, if I have, I don't know, sugar tablet can or these cups or whatever, you'd have to sign in, you'd have to become part of that network, which maybe you would have to require to pay some initial fee to get involved.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I guess.
But yeah, but if you're gonna keep them separate, I guess the thing is you gotta, how are you gonna keep someone from buying my product and then reimbursing it at your store?
Yeah.
But if
Listen,
you have your
I
own
think
coin,
that's
then
the
it doesn't
question,
do that automatically. Because then you can restrict where the person can spend them at.
Well, that's an interesting point. You could probably put something in a smart contract that only allows it to be spent in a certain number of addresses that you own.
Yeah, there's all sorts of.
To do that, actually.
Well, what I'm saying is if I have Joe coin and you're Frank coin through Ethereum, then someone buys something from with my coin, they can't spend it with you because maybe you don't accept them.
Well, then you need a currency.
Yeah, you need
But
to.
then you have the
Yes, that's the value add, right?
It would require the second merchant to have to give a discount for stuff that's bought at a different.
Well, the exchange rate might change that.
That's right.
When you're talking about federation, you're right. This is some of the issues. Thank you for giving the use case for contracts that I now understand.
Yeah.
Where I thought it was just a gadget. But unlike a traditional loyalty system that would have a central transaction processing system and it sits somewhere and we trust that it's accurate and runs it's up all the time. The blockchain solves a multitude of those problems. Well, if you're thinking your currency to be used at his store, really should be worth more because his store is boring. Not a lot of people go there, and you know for a fact that his coins, there's just nothing there very much. You might say, well, it costs 1.5 of my coins to get on that place. So you go buy that. So it costs 50 coins at his place, 50 times 1.5, sure, you go there and do that. You use my coins over there, you get all.
Or you let the market decide that. Just because you're issuing the coin doesn't mean you're the broker of exchange between markets.
Well, the other wrinkle here is we talk about loyalty programs and we talk about the redeemers as being the ones who set value. What happens when you have this constellation of loyalty programs and coin owners as customers who trade?
Right, and we've seen this happen with online games, where these games would say you can't sell our currency for money, and so people would go on eBay.
And that happens all the time, right?
Right.
Even
So as you know, you would sell it for
If
the
you
other
don't-
items.
if you
You
don't
just
make it-
exchange ownership of the
Yeah.
If you don't make a convenient path for people to exchange out,
there is some arbitrator comes in, right? If it is so, the key is value. So Purse.io, for example, is a website where your accumulated Amazon points are traded. So if I wanted to buy a Samsung S7 Edge, I could go to purse.io. There's a guy who buys warehouse full of stuff from Amazon every day. He can't possibly buy more from there. So he's happy to cut you a discount just to get that.
And you're wondering why people would buy Amazon points. Why not use money? And the answer to that is slippage. Anybody ever been in the phone card business? I mean, breakage or slippage? Everybody ever been? Remember the phone card business?
I remember they were
They were worth minutes for dollars.
Correct, yeah.
Surprise. You might buy a card that's worth 700 minutes. I guarantee you never talked all 700 minutes.
Exactly.
You always left a few behind. You usually round them off. Or you talk for 5 minutes and 20 seconds. That's 6 minutes. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That's slippage. And very briefly, the difference between my having to buy 700 minutes of network time so that you can make your calls on a 700-minute card, and my having to buy, say, only 620 minutes because I know you'll slip 80 minutes off of that because you can't avoid it. My rounding is to the second. My rounding is to the minute. My network's rounding is to the second. That's the deal that I have. That 80 minutes. That's my problem. Slippage.
So
If you're an Amazon point guy and you've got Amazon points but you don't have enough to buy what you want, you might say, I'm stuck with these 480 points. But if I had 20 more, I could buy this. I'll buy 20 points just so I can use it before I go in. Think, market.
Yep.
I
So
actually used that recently with work client, the My Wallet thing. It's sort of like if you're just whatever, so the fully JavaScript wallet.
yes, the JavaScript wallet.
Load, but it does all the steps you need to do to sign your transaction and everything, and then you can, use some external node to push the transaction. So
Yeah, and that's one of the topics that I want to discuss. So how do we scale a publicly available application, right? So that everybody, like if you think about a loyalty system, you're going to have tens and thousands of people who need to have a wallet. Wallet could be an app that you build, or it could be something on the web that you go create a wallet and sign in and so on, right? Just like every other, your Bitcoin wallets and so on. But it needs to be ubiquitous, right? And the scalability of it, right? So those are the considerations. So how do you scale? I mean, do you have a node and just parallelize and have 50 servers you could potentially scale up to, each of them being a node, and then have a bunch of wallets, which transact, because you need the get client, right, to do all your transactions.
It's like one of those things that's really similar to Bitcoin, right? There's no magical way that Ethereum solved the problem of a blockchain needing nodes.
That's right.
And the problem of a thin client versus the heavy client. I mean,
That's right. I mean, those
it's
are all
the same exact deal as you have to take.
exactly.
Suppose you have Ford over here and then Chevy over here. How would you keep the people, like Ford doesn't want the Chevy ones and Chevy doesn't want the Ford ones? How can you be kept separate?
No, I mean, and that's the theory here, right? So if you are now a Chevy loyalty member,
No.
you have every incentive to only do Chevy vehicles, When you go to Chicago and you want to do a zip car like rental, and these guys are getting into this business. It's not just idle talk. All these companies are starting to, GM has already deployed a couple of them, one in Ann Arbor, and then they one in New York in a small experiment where they are putting these cars out there where you could go and rent it for a couple of hours, right? So we want you to go to those cars because we'll give you those points and get you addicted. That's the theory, right? Well, even if you, like I said, the other example is even if you go rent from Hertz or Uber or somebody else, maybe you'll pick a GM car. Because guess what? The very act of sitting in the GM car, GM has, we'll give you a couple of points just for doing that, right? Because all you need to do is flip out this app and say, hey, I'm in a GM car. GM has some proprietary, OnStar and stuff like that they could
Have a
look at.
QR code on it?
Yeah, it might even, so today, it's not even that, they do have the codes right now. For example, today, if you like I said, in Ann Arbor, you can go rent a GM vehicle, and what they do is they have their OnStar app that you download, or they have a Maven app, So you download the app, and when you make a reservation, when the time comes for you to rent the car, they send you a code into your phone, and that can unlock your vehicle. And it's good for 2 hours. You are the owner of the vehicle until it expires. So the ability to recognize the fact that you are there, which is what they call as proof of mobility, So as opposed to, and this is not unique though, you guys can read about another company called Lazuz, which uses this whole, blockchain network to kind of reward you. So Lazuz wants to put Uber out of business and all these guys, which is basically saying, hey, you just get on this network. It's the same story, right? And, and you can figure out how you can get a vehicle, some car sharing thing, and you can get a vehicle, and, you just pay a very small transaction fee, and you guys, between the driver of the car and you figure it out, he pays you and you pay him, or, whatever the case may be, right? So there are many other experiments like that. But so these companies, so back to your question, the theory is that, we want you to do all things Ford, or all things GM, or all things Toyota, or so on and so forth. I want to look at it as an outsider and say that's all great, but in reality, what's going to happen, right? You're going to probably use both. What if all your loyalty points were in the blockchain and they can be tradable? Hey, Ford is worth 3 points, and for 2 points of, who decides the marketplace? Somebody says, hey, get all these points.
Yeah, I think that's what would be handy. I think the thing is, there being incentive, like you really do like GM vehicles or whatever, there being incentive for you to keep the points because you have them and you're going to use them.
Right.
If you're just not going to use them that much anyway,
Then,
there's probably going to be some disincentive to just trade them willy-nilly, because usually the person on the other end is going to, you're going to lose.
Yeah, you're going to lose value, right? Yeah.
Equal.
That's right, because
you're trying to get rid of them, so they're going to take them over a cut or something.
That's right, and most of the times you can get a value for loyalty, right? For example, normally the benchmarks are pretty straightforward in the airline industry. It takes 180,000 points to get a business class ticket for $5,000 from here to London, right? So you can do the math, and you can pretty much figure out from here to Albuquerque is probably 20,000 points, right? So you can establish a base value for these. These are real, so these airline companies have to they have to keep in the books the sufficient funds to cover the fact that they have 10 million outstanding points. This is a real thing.
Right.
There's an interesting side take on that. There is a guy called Ribbit.me. He now goes by Loyal, Loyyal. He just changed his name. Who has built a whole crypto, basically this loyalty on the blockchain, right? And that guy has argued, and they're kind of targeting the airline industry and all these big industries. He's argued the fact that there is no liability when you use the blockchain, because the blockchain is the liability, right? So he says these companies can just wipe it clean and say, we don't have to really carry $10 million, 10 million points worth of dollars in our bank accounts. But I don't even want to go there, right? But if you, again, it is no different than what they do today. If you launch these loyalty points with each of these big companies acting as buyer of last resort, right? Because if I can't trade it with you, Morpheus, I can still go back to GM and say, hey, give me something for this, Yeah. Or better yet, I could lose something because there's going to be an intermediary like Bryan sitting there and making a little money, but I could just get Starbucks points, right? And I'm going to give 5 points. It won't be as lucrative as if I went back to GM, because obviously they'll value their coins. It'll be the same with the airlines too. They'll value their, if you go back to them, you'll get much better value, but at least it is of some value, right? So even that thought might make you say, you know what, I'll go with these guys because I can at least trade the damn thing. Maybe it's a loss. At the end of the day, these are additional perks that you're getting, right? So that's an argument. That itself is an argument to say, okay, use it now, because later you can dump it somewhere else and get some value.
Yeah, but it might be worth a lot more. But how would that translate for the company if you buy them? They go up in value, and now you want to unload, and then they have to give you more stuff than if
And-
I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
that
It's
is
interesting because that's a good point. Because I guess
it is.
their value is really determined by what they mean in the end, right? It's what you can get from the company. So
That's
if the
right.
company says, I'm going to give you one car rental for 1,000 points or whatever, that's kind of what they're worth. I guess people trading them may affect their actual trading value. It seems like it would float around the real value.
But let's say, but just for a second here,
Yeah.
let's say this is 1 Ether and this is 2.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the price goes up, so now you get 50 of these. I mean, I just want to see how this might work in the real world, and now the company has to give you 50 of those when all they thought they were going to have to pay was for one. I don't know. I'm just. I mean, it sounds great. I like the whole concept of it all.
You're assuming the company
You know, they just converted their program.
Sorry?
To revenue.
You know what they did?
What? No.
Starbucks changed their program.
Yep.
It used to be, I buy an iced coffee 4 days out of the week.
Mhm.
And I usually buy 3 others during the week, so I buy 7 iced coffees.
Yep.
How many stars did I used to get in a week?
7,
I
right?
used to get 7 stars, and every 12 stars I got a free drink.
Yep.
That's basically a discount value. Yeah. Because you think loyalty, we need discount.
Yep.
Now what they do is they base points on dollars. My 7 drinks are worth 5 times 320 is about $15. That's $16. That's 16 stars. I need 125 stars to get a free drink. That's no math in your head. I am not disappointed. It's not bad. It's okay. It's not much different. It's a little different.
Yeah.
Because if I buy tall iced coffee 5 times a week, I still get 5 stars. And today, if I buy tall iced coffee 5 days a week, I get 7.5 stars. Now, the venti, I get no stars.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm buying bigger drinks I'm getting. The core of the loyalty business is when you decide how much you want to reward people who do business with you, you decide what your points will be.
Exactly.
You decide that. Amazon, for instance, you can get membership points from American Express. You can use to buy goods on Amazon, whatever the heck you want, like money, because it is value. That was a fairly big deal, because up until then, loyalty points locked you to whoever issued them. Airlines being the best example.
Absolutely.
Of that. Now,
Absolutely.
I hear talk here about how loyalty points is worth this much or that much. It's the redeemer who decides how much.
Exactly. So they.
It's never going to be the customer directly, but indirectly. If, for instance, an airline pays they have too much overhanging points, they got 500 million points. Left.
Exactly.
If anybody starts cashing in their points today, there will be no money coming in for a month. That could be tough. They can actually make it attractive to people to cash points or cash points when they feel like it would be nice to do them, and maybe even reward you with those credit blackouts.
It's the.
It's a game they play to try to continue the reward cycle.
Yeah.
By
But
deciding,
just not
I will
pursue
give
too.
you more. I'll give you more for your points now because I'd like you to use them.
That's
I
right.
want you to use them with me, of course. For
Yep.
now.
For businesses now, right? Like,
For business.
Or a lean segment, or you know.
Ultimately, if you're talking about a reward scheme, I think you're always talking about the value being set by the redeemer.
Yeah.
And they have many motivations. So there are winners and losers in that. Now, Starbucks, I think, has changed this partly because they realized that essentially they could give me a huge discount on drinks if I bought smalls all the time. And then Saturday morning, so that my wife could mail up one of those really weird multi-recipe Java chip coffees.
$10 cup.
You could make a $10 cup, and I would need $12.80 tall iced coffees.
Yeah.
Pretty good deal.
And
They finally figured that out, and you know why they did it now? This program is big enough that even the shrinkage they'll get from the people
That's-
saying they do is not a big deal.
Exactly.
They were never their core customer.
That's
I'm
the-
their core customer.
That is the
I'm
real
loyal,
key.
I'm loyal with my dollars, I'm free with my dollars, and I will not suffer badly under the new program.
Correct.
Cheapskates have figured it out, they'll suffer badly.
Correct. And you don't want them. Yeah.
As they should, because they
We don't want those customers that might much well anyway.
they might get them back.
Yeah, they might get them back, but if we lose, a big deal.
There's well,
It's not much of a big deal.
the opportunity cost, right? Because they're not such a big deal to start with. Oh, wow.
And it's
That
really-
happens. You have waivers.
Yeah, we both said it.
Yeah. I can't really do anything.
That's the
So what are we
side
looking at
chains are essentially first class in Ethereum.
Yellow, you've got whatever. So does that make sense that in a loyalty scheme is the redeemer the sense of value? And they have a lot of motivation. I'm dying to hear how this works because I work in a loyalty
You do? All right.
program. Oh, not Star.
Star, no.
No, I don't work for Star.
Yeah.
I work for American Express.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And I touched the Plenty program every once in a while,
Mm.
which is that's a fairly weird one. We don't actually give Plenty points for American Express charges. There will be merchants hooked up that are doing this. Macy's and Exxon are the two biggest that I know of. It's basically what any merchant wants to get in. Plenty points as loyalty points can actually be traded elsewhere than where they were.
And
So you could go to Macy's and nail up your prom dress, get a bunch of Plenty points. You might be surprised, but girls respond to an offer from their favorite manicure place to grow their Plenty points on a super manicure. Keeping it in the family.
Yeah.
And that's the loyalty program.
that is what it is, right?
It would be interesting to see how blockchain starts to work to make that work differently for merchants as well.
Exactly.
A few committed merchants will sit down and work this out and start their own little ad hoc loyalty system.
Correct.
Not be that difficult. And if you want to go ahead and get strike cards made to do it.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, you do that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You would phone that.
Exactly.
Wide open. And
One
Ethereum
concern I would have with multiple merchants sort of participating in a shared loyalty points program,
Yeah.
what about volatility within that market? And how would you protect a single merchant, particularly if they're a small merchant? Let's say the value of the loyalty points goes up, or the quantity of the loyalty points dispersed goes up. A small coffee shop, for instance, could be put out of business.
And that's why I think, yeah, that's a valid question or concern, right? And I look at it similar to what the airlines do it today, right? They kind of control the total flow or the net float of coins
Well,
at
I
a
can
point
control
in.
that with my own business, but if I'm part of a consortium,
Correct.
now I have to have, in order for this to be stable between us, I have to have an agreement with the rest of the consortium members about when and where these points can be dispersed, and we need to do price fixing to some degree in order to keep that small market. So
Exactly.
now you run into, well, is price fixing in this context legal?
Yeah. I mean, there are interesting questions on stability, right? I mean, I think this has been, one of the things that I bookmark all the time, I have it permanently bookmarked here somewhere, is the search for a stable cryptocurrency by, I think that was Vitalik's, one of Vitalik's articles, right? There are a lot of, and I did listen to a couple of fintech guys talk about how to manipulate some of
This
these
is not
things.
a consequence of it being the cryptocurrency.
No, it is not.
It's a consequence of it being a small market.
That's right. Any market, right? But the thing with the large companies is that they are market makers, right? Because they are so big, and that's where I said there's possibly a concept of buyer of last resort, right? You should, in a perfectly tradable world, right? And this is kind of true. I think I'm not a stock market expert by any means, but the market makers are there always to offer some level of stability. There is a sponge out there. In GM's case, GM is the giant sponge that will suck any excess in order for the small merchant not to be zipped out, right?
We call
So
that
liquidity, right?
It's not. It doesn't sound like stability.
Yeah.
But it is. So in the current world, a loyalty program like Delta SkyMiles is essentially built on the American Express platform,
Mm-hmm.
with a few multi-million dollars worth of service, etc., customer care professionals dying to answer your questions, blah, blah, blah. Other systems like Plenty, this is another platform in American Express.
Sure.
With all those servers, all those there are many questions to ask, but still, this is where blockchain makes this accessible to a very small group.
Correct.
Because you can write contracts that do what you want to do. And as you say, for instance, you can make it into a wallet. But is there any reason I can't put my public key on a little tag like this? Or get a public key from a tag like this, and I'd like to have this? And then later you can probably work out enough app work in Node.js or whatever that you can probably figure out how to fill out a wallet app with this, so I can tap with my phone or use a key tag.
Yeah, I think there are some hardware-based, keys, right?
Yeah, you could definitely put a public key on anything like that easily, which would be cool because you can receive the points really easily. You probably need either a phone app or like a hardware, like maybe a Bitcoin hardware wallet.
But these are not very complex apps.
Right, I mean they could be.
There's bound to be a little business come up at some point around this constellation that says, you want to start writing contracts, you can do cool things. I can deliver you an app quick for a phone that will happily implement your contracts at arm's length. Yeah. Which would mean that I come up here to do business, whatever, I buy something, I tap my phone on a reader, it could be an existing reader, we don't really know what to do with that. But I tap it on anything, the chip that's in your POS, whatever. And that's where the little app runs that decides, okay, we'll go do this, and the wallet is now going to be configured for that new app.
Yeah, and
that's the cost of entry is significant.
that's right. It's just provisioning, right?
All that server transaction process that had to be done in blockchain.
That's right. So think about it. So that's
and other use cases for this. We say loyalty program. This could be a gift card program.
Oh yeah.
You run your own fabulous little coffee shop downtown Gilbert, makes really great coffee. You could use this for local cards.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or in a shopping mall, a strip mall, you attend all these different merchants in the shopping center, and we'll use, Gilbert and Val Vista, or Gilbert and Warner Shopping Center coins, maybe, or whatever.
No, I mean, without even getting into all the DAO, distributed autonomous organization stuff, you can easily, if you want to start a company and issue shares this way, this is how easy it could be. You could create 100,000 shares.
Yep.
I don't know if it's legal, but you know what I mean? You could say, I'm going to create, this token and name it, give it the title of my company, and you guys are all going to be shareholders, and they give you each 1,000 shares.
That's
and
right.
you could prove that you own the shares. And
Yeah, and that is the other.
And then you can extend that.
Exactly, because it doesn't even have to be. Because what do you need, right? You need a secure way. This is what they're talking about. It can be something very fixed. In our company, if we decide to take on 2 more guys, and everybody wants to be assured, I don't want to pay a dang lawyer for this, right? And all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another company which is offering this simple service, which says, okay, we'll create 4 accounts. I build 25,000 shares for each one of you, and it'll be a double-signed contract. The escrow lawyer will do it so that I get run over by a bus. Nobody can change this fact. And we did it for. I don't care if it's $9, if it costs a whole ether to do this, right? I'm going to excise it once in, I don't know. So, you can kind of extend this to an infinite number of applications because the Ethereum platform is there.
There are some risks. In a small community, a small number of users in a blockchain, when 51% of the nodes decide to get together and collude, bad things can happen.
Yes.
Bitcoin has faced this a couple of times that I'm aware of. They've survived it because the fork was resolved pretty quickly. But you do have the problem where if more than half of the nodes agree on a chain transaction that should have been, the 49% have a hard time fighting that. Yeah. It's not a 100% vote. Right. It only has to meet the standards. So there are some issues there. And just between you and me, if you want to issue stock and build a public company and have real value, real money attached to it, you can be sure.
Well, what is the mechanism that Ether has to prevent that scenario? Is it 51% attack? Is it the same type of?
It's the same.
It's
all of them suffer from the same
but
issue,
even
right?
if you only have 5 people, so I guess the question is, how obviously Bitcoin, there have been issues with possible 51% attacks, and now you're talking about Bitcoin, but now Bitcoin's so big that at least among cryptocurrencies, it probably has one of the lower risks of happening.
The last time I saw this, it was a velocity problem. You move fast enough, you can distort the chain long enough to cause trouble. So far, the community's dealt with it pretty good. The community is more than big enough now that if anybody tried to pull it off, there would be problems, and they'd probably find themselves forked off and try to figure out what to do with that.
Right.
And Bitcoins that aren't part of the publicly accepted chain aren't worth anything. They go way back.
And that's why people like Ethereum are a tremendous amount of backing by so many, all the industries. And so I look at it like this, right? I mean, as all business people, we just take bets with, and who do you want to take a bet with, right?
Yeah.
And if I want to build something, I got to choose somebody who is backed by, all these other guys. And, there's $50 million that somebody spent on this just now, all the banks and the fintechs, and there's a whole host of guys who are building on top of this, right? And I let the smart people figure out all this, proof of work versus proof of this. And, in the sense that we obviously need to be aware of it, but that's part of the whole idea of discussing with others and then trying to figure out what is it that.
Okay, so going back to the company, like say you're going to sell off 4 shares, and then let's say I had my shares, and I want to sell part of them off to someone who wasn't part of that same group. Could I do that with Ethereum, or is that something that...
It's all strictly how you want to write it, right? So you might say...
Well, like say the administrators didn't put that into the code. Could I send those coins to someone else?
You could, unless if they were smart enough to say, you need at least the consent of 2 of those guys who need to sign it with a
put
key.
that in the contract. But if they didn't put that in the contract, then I could sell a portion of my dojo coins to someone else that wasn't part of the initial
Absolutely, yes.
group.
Absolutely, yes. Because that's the power of this, right?
Yeah.
All that protects or not protects you is your private key. You have it.
In the worst case scenario or best or whatever, right? If you want to sell all your shares to somebody and the contract didn't allow it, you could sell them your private key. Now they have to understand. You probably have to come to a legal agreement outside of the blockchain that you wouldn't steal those coins, right? Like we could talk to a lawyer, and I could sign a contract that had, what I mean, that said you now own that private key. I'm going to pretend I never saw it, and if I ever were to steal it or something, it'd be weird, right? I don't know. So, but you could do that theoretically, but that would obviously not be so great for the person that was on the receiving end, because you never know,
if they were lying or something.
Stole everything, got hacked. This person now is like liable and all these things.
And most of the things, right? If you think about this, the fact that we have had P2P encryption, it's been there for a long time. The concept that you securely hold a private key, right? And only you can, and you provide a public key, and then people can send something, and only I can open or unlock it, right? Has existed all the time. Really, your credit card is really the reverse, right? You're displaying your private key to everybody, and you want this see that back card 090, you give it away, right?
Yeah.
But how do you keep that private key private is a fundamental issue that I don't know, unless you stick something in your DNA or something like that. They'll
that's
figure
the
something
ultimate
out.
key, is
And,
your DNA.
But we are going to have that problem forever, right? I mean, most of the compromises that you hear about is because people don't want to use anything like phone or anything. You go to the web, what will happen? They can only ask you for a secure password to secure your private key. Secondly, your private key is stored in some public server. I have no idea how it won't get hacked.
Why you see,
What is that?
Euro MasterCard users. You all have a chip card, anybody?
Yeah.
I just got a fresh chip card. It's a beautiful thing. Got the little gold.
Correct, yeah.
Contacts, that's the chip.
Right.
This is a cryptographic mini computer in here. Does the job. It does something that you would have had to have a real box to do.
Yeah.
And that does away with the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers on the card that
Right.
don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
And the best you could do if you could figure out how, you could use it once, But if somebody found a way to mimic it, use it once, when you go to use yours, all year it doesn't work, you have been alerted, and that's what you really want.
Yeah.
First, to be alerted to the fraud, and secondly, to try to prevent it. To think that you can prevent all the fraud is pointless.
Yeah. That's,
Right now, the
that's a good
public
point, though.
key has to
You're
be secure.
having some kind of a, because they have, like Ledger Wallet and stuff, right? Similar, where it's one of those trusted execution environments and everything. So, I mean, but here's the problem with hardware. So the difference between like a true cryptocurrency hardware wallet is we think of it as like enthusiasts is that you're really the only, you and your little device are really the only ones who know that, and all your money's actually in there. Like if I had an app that ran in the trusted execution environment of my Android, and I had set it up so I'm the only one who knows the private key, this device is really the only thing in the universe that knows that private key.
Correct.
Right. But then that's a problem when I drop this off the,
somewhere.
It's gone.
Correct.
So, but that's all with credit card companies, because your money's not really in your credit card, or it's not really in your phone when you have Apple Pay. It's on their servers, and this thing just controls access to it. Right? So there's a benefit, even though that's less secure in terms of if they wanted to steal your money and like pretend your account was empty and the CEO just put it in his account. You know what I mean? But theoretically, they can do that, right? Whereas with cryptocurrency, they couldn't. That's where I guess it's where that's where there's a problem, right?
We trust the credit card companies.
We do
That they run their basic transaction processing correctly, accurately,
Correct.
and securely.
Yeah.
That they do at least try to minimize fraud and they pursue
Yeah.
and prosecute.
And we are willing to pay a price for it, right?
Blockchain changes that because it's such an open process.
Right.
Almost anybody part of the process can examine the blockchain and try to figure out what actually happened, and could go back and say, "Oh, I see the problem back here.
Yeah.
You tried to double spend that. Shame on you." And the blockchain either heals that quickly by refusing the transaction, or it exposes it so you can't get away with it in private. Yeah. And just as with the credit card you use to go buy gift cards at a store, run across town and redeem the gift cards at another store, if you can do that fast enough, you get away with it. And you fence the code on eBay, congratulations, got away with it. Except if we ever really figure it out, we might be able to swap that code being sold, and we've caught your eBay account, and boom, we're going to go after somebody. Speed is of the essence there if you work it out that way. In the blockchain, it's visible.
Yeah.
That's the power of the technology. And again, to me, I understand this better now because I'm still way on ankle deep in this. This lets you do something which otherwise would require you to make a huge investment in transaction processing equipment, hardware and software. And it would centralize it, be sitting someplace dying to be turned on by accident, or flooded out, or forgotten for a moment, or somebody put a change in that didn't work, and it's the middle of Sunday night, oh my God, and all this stuff. And I have to run ACH to make pay all of you. Great. This is going to go out really well, and I can't make any deposits. Everyone's going to go crazy. This is within arm's length of fairly average people who are willing to work out technology. It's a high school project. And truthfully, it is. You can get a couple of high school kids together and start building wallets and build a gift card system for your little coffee shop, and all you probably have to pay them is a reasonable amount of money and a lot of free fun. Right? Yeah. The zeros. You're missing all these zeros from this transaction.
What about how could this be integrated with a POS system, or
That's the
because obviously you wouldn't want to like charge a customer and then like have to do some calculations.
absolutely.
So this can be. What's the level of difficulty of integration with
I
a
know POS is independent. If you've got something old, legacy, complex, like an old Visual Basic app, you've got your hands full.
Well,
If you get something fresh which actually works on an API or gateway somewhere, you might find that your programming problems are much simpler. And having spent a good part of my day fooling around with POS vendor who did a really stupid thing, it just depends on how flexible your POS code is, whether you can add this feature.
You can
Because
flip it on its head, right?
The modern POS system has these ability to access the system in such a way that you wouldn't have, this could be
So-
running in the background and we just automatically do it.
The POSs that should be doing this are on Square.
Well,
They should be building
you
the
can-
capabilities to handle things like that. Now, I don't know exactly how that would work, but Square could easily treat Bitcoin like another currency. There's a way to make all of that work. It's not that impossible. They're just swiping cards now, or if they have EMV readers, they're happy to do all that. Square can do that now. I don't see why, for instance, my swipe card couldn't just be my public key.
And if you think about it, right? I mean, wallets. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all going to. I mean, today this is true. Apple Pay and all these things. It's just an app, right?
Yeah.
The app today is sending you money from your account, checking account or whatever, right? And as part of that, it can also trigger off a series of transactions, right? You could be sending points or money, right?
So
So
Apple accepts MasterCard, Visa, American Express. Why not accept something else?
that's right.
Yeah, like
It's not trivial, but
Yeah.
it can be done.
Yeah.
And the power here is all of the back of this, all the back end of this is affordable, it's practical, it's reasonable, it can be done on a kitchen table, as opposed to figuring out how to get Apple Pay to accept American Express.
Right.
We were partners for that, by the way, and we suffered some arrows on the chest from that.
No, it's like there's a donut shop near my house, and so like this, premium donuts or whatever. But they have a little iPad, like an iPad Mini sitting there. So I pay normally, but then there's a little iPad, and I just put in like my email, and I get loyalty points. So you could easily, even if a POS system couldn't accept it, you could, just sell that iPad Mini to vendors
And more and more, right? And that's what, right? I mean, unified wallets come to play, wherein, so if you flip it on its head, let us say that this place awards you points. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
They take the money, the POS system has to say, I settle at the end of the day some account, right? So they send to you, as long as they know that Morpheus is this credit card, right?
Right.
Then they can just say, hey, credit his wallet, your public key. I can send you 20 points onto your public key, and then you're done. And when you came in, you would just tap your phone somewhere so that they can pick your public key and say, okay, he paid with this currency. Here is my public key, and I can send some points to it. So behind the scenes.
They the universities doing their grading system.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that would be really cool. I was thinking, because I don't remember all the courses I took.
That's
cool
right.
to have your courses on a blockchain and have your degree, especially your degree, right? All those issues you had people saying, I have this degree, and then they don't. Or
That's
they,
right.
You have a degree, you can't prove it because they can't get the
Even for a
paper or
big
something.
university, that's a practical data set.
Yeah.
No, the CEOs have been fired, right, for lying.
Yeah, it's like,
What makes you think you can? Anyway, it's just crazy. But there is those type of registries.
You can use the blockchain there to validate your other data.
Right.
You can keep all the details elsewhere. Who cares? Just the basic. Who was the student? What was the course? What was the grade? What was the dates? That's enough data that's acceptable.
Yeah, it's like ridiculously easy to just add text to a transaction. There's literally like in the wallet, there's a field that's like hex, and you can just hex encode any text and just put it in a transaction.
Yeah, there is a data right in here.
So if you wanted to put, and some of those things they made it. It's just like making new currency. They made it almost.
Yeah, there's just data, right? You can just stick some data along with this and goes as the
complex
payload.
parts will be the parts that you brought up, like these issues at the end, and then also like what do you